Well, not anymore. There was a time that I did. I think after the second or third year, I started finally to beatle Paul McCartney, the last of the group to renounce bachelorhood, was married in London this morning to Linda Eastman, an American divorcee and the mother of a 6-year-old girl. The wedding took place at the Marylebone Registry Office. In its golden age, Hollywood loved to advertise itself as a factory of perfection, where any flaw could be hidden under bright powder and blazing lights. But the deeper we dig, the more we discover a bizarre paradox. The men considered the standard of beauty, the dream figures of an entire generation, often chose to love and marry women who were nowhere near Hollywood's design blueprint. Some leading men married teachers nearly 2 decades older than themselves. Some legends stayed with wives so short that just standing next to them created a visually unbalanced frame. And there were even A-list stars who chose as their life partners women so round, simple, and ordinary that fans mistook them for catering staff on the set. These stories aren't widely known because the press at the time largely buried them to protect the stars' images. That's why today, we're going to unlock a long-closed door of old Hollywood and step into 11 stories that would have shocked audiences of the time. Hollywood stars who married plain-looking wives. Marlon Brando and Movida Castaneda. The secret marriage between the most handsome star of his era and the woman 7 years older. The moment the story of the secret marriage between Marlon Brando and Movida Castaneda broke in 1962, many readers of the Los Angeles Times were stunned for one simple reason. They could not imagine the sensual symbol of 1950s Hollywood choosing to marry a woman 7 years older than him, whose appearance went completely against the beauty standards of that time. The press called it the clearest off-standard case of post-war Hollywood, a remark that only made people more curious about just how stark the contrast was between these two people, who had loved each other in silence for many years. At that time, Marlon Brando possessed what many considered a flawless look: sharp features, a straight nose, gray-blue eyes, broad shoulders, a lean and toned physique. Director Elliot Kazan once described Brando as an entire generation of youth, condensed into a single man. Whenever Brando walked into any room in Hollywood, people practically stopped breathing just to look at him. Movida Castaneda, on the other hand, came from a different world. She appeared with a solid build, broad shoulders, a large frame, hands roughened by years of stage dancing. Her brown skin glowed under the lights, but by the standards of the day, it was considered too earthy. Her facial features were strong: high cheekbones, a square jaw, deep-set eyes, intense expressions. Some journalists in 1955 described Movida in a half-compliment, half-critique way, saying she had a beauty rooted more in strength than in softness. She had none of Grace Kelly's blonde porcelain elegance, none of Elizabeth Taylor's classic sharpness, and none of the fragile quality Hollywood worshipped at the time. Movida carried a grounded presence, light makeup, simple clothing, making her stand out as different to an audience used to heavily polished faces. The two met in late 1953 when Brando attended a party hosted by director John Huston in Los Angeles. Movida had been invited to perform a Mexican folk dance. In that lively setting, Brando, as usual, became the center of every gaze, while Movida remained calm, seemingly unconcerned by his presence. Some witnesses recalled that it was precisely that calmness that caught Brando's attention. She spoke naturally, without flattery, even talking about unpredictable performance schedules and the small pay in the dance world. Brando was drawn to the life experience in Movida's voice. A friend of his later recounted in Variety that one evening in Bunker Hill, Brando quietly said, "With her, I feel like I can breathe easier." From then on, the two began seeing each other more often, but both kept their relationship quiet. Between 1954 and 1959, Movida appeared next to Brando at a few small events in Los Angeles, but always sat in the back or avoided cameras. A few paparazzi from the Hollywood Citizen News managed to snap photos of the two walking together round Venice Beach, sparking rumors that Brando seemed to be building a private life separate from the limelight. They married quietly in Monterey in 1960 with only a few close friends present. The ceremony was so simple that the Monterey Peninsula Herald gave it just a tiny line on the back page. At that time, Brando was still surrounded by rumors about his breakup with Rita Moreno, while Movida quietly slipped out of public view to avoid muddying the narrative. However, married life was far from peaceful. In 1961, Movida became pregnant, but the pregnancy ended in heartbreaking disappointment, casting a heavy shadow over their relationship. Meanwhile, Brando entered the most prominent phase of his career and slowly lost control under a packed shooting schedule. He constantly had to travel between Los Angeles and film locations in Hawaii, Tahiti, and New York. This distance provided fertile ground for all kinds of rumors. By 1962, when Mutiny on the Bounty was shooting in Tahiti, the media began capturing intimate moments between Brando and his young co-star Tarita Taripia. The Hollywood Reporter published an article in November of that year hinting that Brando might have a new relationship in Tahiti. Mova was then living in Los Angeles, rarely going out and avoiding the press. Amid the roaring rumors, a press conference for the film in Honolulu recorded by CBS unintentionally revealed a detail that caused a stir. Brando sat next to Tarita, chatting warmly, while his representative refused to answer questions about his married life. Reporters immediately reached out to Terry for any sign of movida, and that was when the public learned that the couple had been separated since the summer of 1962. After months of silence, Mova finally completed the separation process. When a reporter asked for the reason, a close friend of hers simply replied, "They live at two different speeds," a short answer, but enough to convey the growing distance between two people who had been quietly connected for nearly a decade. By that point, the story of Brando and Movida had become one of the most remarkable chapters in the private lives of Golden Age Hollywood stars. In that context, there was another case that stirred even more debate where the next man chose to marry a woman almost 20 years older than himself. Two, Dan Blocker and Delphia Parker, the Bonanza giant and the small woman behind the TV lights, among the couples who fascinated American TV audiences the most in the 1960s. Dan Blocker and Dia Parker consistently ranked near the top, not because of scandals, but because of their physical contrast, so pronounced that many people thought they were uncle and niece rather than husband and wife. Dan Blocker, standing close to 2 meters tall with a giant build like a walking fortress, was famous on the small screen thanks to his role as host Cartwright in Bonanza. Small eyes, a gentle smile, broad shoulders, and a sturdy frame made him look like a character straight out of a Western folktale. Just standing in frame, Blocker made everything and everyone around him seem smaller. Meanwhile, his wife, Delphia Lee Parker, had a completely different appearance. She was short with a petite figure, a softly rounded face with gentle features, and wavy hair usually tied neatly at the back. Dia looked more like a library student or small-town school teacher than the wife of one of the most powerful TV stars in America. What few know is that Dan and Delphia met when they were both students at Hardin-Simmons University in Texas, back when Dan had not yet become the giant host, but was just a big, somewhat awkward guy passionate about theater, yet full of worries about his future. Delphia, with her calmness and natural discipline, was the one who made Dan feel that his life had finally found an anchor. When they married in 1952, friends joked, Dia helped Dan fit back into the world. What they meant was that from the day they wed, Dan stopped drifting. He became more responsible, focused, and driven, especially after the couple welcomed twins in 1957, followed by 2 more children in the years after. Family life became the foundation that allowed Dan to throw himself wholeheartedly into acting. When Bonanza became a nationwide hit, the press started paying attention to Dan's private life. Audiences were surprised to see him always walking beside a small, plainly dressed woman. No heavy makeup, no ostentation. The exact opposite of the star wife image usually seen on magazine covers. Some pieces at the time described the visual mismatch of the couple with a tone both curious and incredulous. But what Hollywood respected most wasn't their appearance. It was the absolute privacy of the Blocker family. Dia Parker never exploited her husband's fame, never appeared on talk shows, never stepped into press conferences. People on set said Dan always rushed home after filming, and Delphia was the one who managed everything: finances, schedules, and the upbringing of their 4 children. There were no scandals, no rumors of separation, only the heavy pressure of work that left Dan exhausted. When he died suddenly in 1972, the entire Bonanza crew was stunned. Dia disappeared from public view right after the funeral, retreating to protect her family and her husband's memory. One of the quietest withdrawals in American television history, even though Dan and Dia's story was so private that Hollywood had nothing left to exploit. Global entertainment history still holds another off-standard example that generated much fiercer debate. This time it